Howdy folks, welcome back to another Out of Spec Renew video. My name's Alex. We're here at my shop in Portland, Oregon called Wattworks. And what I've got here today to work on is a Fiat 500e. This car was brought to me by the customer not running, and it appears that it has an issue with the motor. At least that's what the dealer said. According to the dealer, there is a fault with the temperature sensor in the stator, and that's what's preventing the car from being able to run. Now, of course, I'm going to go through and double check their diagnosis and confirm that that's actually our issue. And if it does indeed need a motor replacement, then that's probably what we're going to go ahead and do. So let's dive right in. So to start things off here, let's go ahead and just show what the symptoms are. You can hear the contactors on the car closed as I opened the door there. We're going to go ahead and hop in here. We'll put our key in and start it. And you can see it says it is not ready, service propulsion system. If I close the door here, it will not let us go into any gear other than neutral or park. So let's go ahead and plug in our diagnostic program and see what codes we have stored. So I've got my diagnostic program pulled up on the laptop here. This is Alpha OBD. Works on pretty much all Fiat Chrysler vehicles. And I'm just plugged into the car into the OBD2 port with a Bluetooth dongle. We're going to go ahead and connect to the power inverter module here, because that is what should be storing our temperature sensor code if it is indeed there. And we have P0A2D, drive motor A, temperature sensor 1 circuit high. So that would indicate that our temperature sensor is measuring higher than what the car expects. Let's see what we have for our data here. And here's our e-machine stator temperature value. And it says it's 14.66 degrees C, which, what is that? Probably about 50 something degrees Fahrenheit. Now I know that the customer said that this was started as an intermittent fault and it got to a point where the car wouldn't drive anymore. So let's see what happens if we try and clear the fault. So I'm going to scroll down here to clear. We'll hit clear. And we'll hit read faults, and it came right back. So that is indeed our issue here. All right, so I've got the hood opened up here, and I pulled the cover off right here. It just pops in there. There's nothing that really holds it in place. It just has these little kind of ball and socket things that it pops onto. But what we need to do now is we need to get to the power inverter module connector that has the stator temperature wiring from the motor, and that connector is on the front of the PIM. I don't know if it's even possible for me to really even capture it on camera because it's buried way down in here. So I've got the car up in the air here, and it actually is a bit easier to see the connector on the PIM from down here. Perhaps if I can line the camera up in just the right spot and get my light shining in the right place as well. There we go. So it is right up there. That connector buried way up in the top there. If I can get the camera to focus on it, you can kind of see it. So anyway, I'm going to get that unplugged, and then we're also going to unplug, I believe it's this connector on the motor right here, and that should be our wiring harness for stator temperature. Alright, well, that was a big time struggle. It was extremely difficult to get the PIM connector, which is that one up there, out, and then I had to twist it and rotate it around so I can gain access to the front side. I almost thought I wasn't going to be able to get it unplugged without removing the radiator because there's so little access. I could barely fit my hands in there. And then I've also got the motor side sensor as well, so I'm going to go ahead and get some probes, and we'll go ahead and probe those out and make sure we have good continuity. All right, hopefully you can see the multimeter there all right, but I've got one side probed and we've only got 0.8 ohms of resistance, which with my probing setup, which is a little bit difficult to do in here, that seems pretty reasonable. We'll go ahead and swap pins. This light's probably going to wash out the multimeter for you guys, so you'll have to bear with me just a second while I swap pins here, because I can't see. And there you go. So we've only got a couple tenths of an ohm of resistance there as well. So it looks like we're good for circuit integrity on this. It is just a signal, so it doesn't really have to carry any real current or anything. So that means that now I can move on and I can check the sensor values on the sensor itself, which honestly I probably should have started with rather than trying to unplug all this. So anyway, let's go ahead and check that. Let's see what we get for values. So I'm getting about 19,000 ohms, which is pretty close to what we're looking for. It's maybe just a touch higher than what I would have expected, but not by any extreme margin. So according to Fiat's diagnostic tree, that would mean that the PIM needs to be replaced. Although I kind of don't think that makes sense at this point. I did actually look at this car once before when it first arrived. It's been here for a little while, and the temperature sensor value was way out of whack. So I was actually a little bit surprised to see that it looked pretty normal when we plugged in earlier. However, something that I'm not sure that I mentioned when I unplugged the PIM connector, that really difficult one up there, is it looked like it maybe wasn't fully plugged in. So maybe I'll try and plug everything back in. We'll go through, we'll clear the codes again, and see if anything changes. All right, so I got everything plugged back in. It definitely did seem like that connector on the PIM, when I put it in, I was able to get the little piece that slides in to actually pop into place all the way, and it definitely, I don't think, was like that when I unplugged it. So that very well might be the issue here. It might have been that when this car went to the dealer, they unplugged that to do their inspection, and then they didn't fully plug it back in. I don't know. We'll see. I guess I'll bring the car back down, we'll plug our computer back in, clear the codes, and see what happens. All right, so first things first, I'm just going to see what happens if we try to start it, if we still get a powertrain error, or if it'll just turn on. Okay, we do still have service propulsion system. I'm going to turn it off, and I'm just going to go to the first click on the key, see what happens when we clear some codes. Let's go ahead and connect to our power inverter module. We are connected. We'll hit read faults, clear faults, and it did come right back. Oh, interesting. Okay, so I am getting an incorrect reading, negative 10 degrees C. So, yeah, because I wasn't actually doing that as a live scan. So we'll stop scan. I'm just gonna select a few different things here, and we'll start another scan. There we go. So we've got some live data now on those different categories. I may not have been correct on that before. I don't know what this extra little red value means, but we're measuring negative 10 on stator temperature. Interesting. Okay, let me see what we can figure out from that, because that's a new piece of data that I guess I neglected to actually have set up properly before. So I've come back to taking measurements on the connectors here, because what we experienced didn't quite make sense. because before it seemed much more likely that there was a problem with the actual temperature sensor side rather than something on the PIM. And I just made an interesting discovery. So if I tone out one side of this harness, one of the wires, it tones out just fine. The other side, I have discovered, only tones out if I shove this pin all the way back here and push on it real hard inside of the connector. And even then, right now, I can't get it to duplicate that. But you can see I'm getting no, open circuit there. However, if I take my probe here and I stick it in the back side of this wire on the connector here, there you can see we have, basically zero resistance between the pin on the PIM and this wire, where it should connect to this pin on the connector where it would measure the motor temperature. However, if I put it in the pin here, I get nothing. So, I had a little something there for a second. But anyways, at this point, I'm thinking that there's actually a problem with the pin or the crimp or something in this connector. Maybe the actual where it's crimped on is corroded or something. I don't see any signs of corrosion looking at it visually, but there's got to be some sort of a problem here. Oh, there we go. Yeah, see, if I shove this pin way back in there, I can get a connection, but if I pull it back out, it's still touching the pin on the connector, but I have no connection. If I wiggle it around, sometimes I get a little something, but it clearly does not have a solid connection. So at this point, I'm thinking that might be our culprit there, might be just a simple pin on that connector. So I am going to see if I can pop the pins out of this connector here, and we'll see what we're dealing with. The tough part about this is that the wires going in here are in pairs and they're the same colors. I think one of them is our high voltage interlock circuit, so that one's just a loop. It shouldn't matter which position is which. The thermistor, technically I don't think it should really matter, because it's basically just an inline resistor, but I would like to keep everything where it's supposed to be, so I might pull the tape back just a little bit and see if I can mark those wires somehow before I pull the pins out. So I got our two wires here depinned. I actually just marked one of them with a silver Sharpie so that I know where it goes. The wires for the even numbered pins I marked with a silver Sharpie, so those ones should be easy to identify when they're ready to go back in. But anyways, our problem child is this one right here, and if I flip this around, don't know, yeah, you won't be able to see that. Let me try and adjust my multimeter here. There you go. It's actually perfect. Okay, so this pin is our problem child, and you can see if I pull on the pin, we get no connection. But if I push on the pin just ever so slightly, we get a connection. Pull, connection goes away. Push, we get a connection. So that leads me to believe that our wires in this pin, or well, in the wire behind the pin somewhere, that's it's separated. So at this point, my only option really is going to be to cut that pin off, but there's not enough length here to be able to reattach. So anyway, that's pretty cut and dried there. It's interesting just how simple of a problem that is. So I don't know if that wire became corroded inside of the sheath somehow, or somehow the wire has broken. So really the only thing that's making a connection is if I push and pull on it just a little bit. But like I said, there's not enough length here for me to be able to splice it together. I mean, I've only got, maybe 1/8 of an inch of wire there, 1/4 of an inch at the very most. So there's not enough to be able to cut that and re-splice it. My light is wigging out here because the battery's dying. So I'm going to have to see if I can find this connector as like a pigtail harness, or if I can buy this harness as a complete unit. And really the most economical repair here would be to splice another connector in. But I'm going to have to see if I can actually find that. So I guess that's what I'm going to do. Although I am curious to see what the actual failure mode is here. If I can pull on that pin, if it'll come apart. Oh yeah, I can see the wire coming apart. So the wire literally just pulled apart right there at the insulation. If I can get it to focus. Yeah, it just pulled apart. I was able to pull it apart by hand. So somehow that wire became disconnected and was no longer making a proper connection. So let me see what I can find out about hopefully fixing this. All right, so I've got a little test set up here going on. I did talk to the customer, and I've actually went ahead and ordered a pigtail harness, but I want to do a little test here and see if we can actually get this car to run by basically just bypassing the existing temperature sensor. So I have the connector plugged back in up here, and I have our 2 wires pulled out where our temperature sensor would go, and I have a pair of resistors put in line there that should bring the resistance value up to about 15,500 ohms, give or take, which is roughly in what would be the 15 C range for our temperature sensor. So I've got one lead going up to our PIM connector up there, and I have the other one probed here. So I'm going to get the camera set up here, and we should be able to connect our other pin here, and we should get about 15,500 ohms on the multimeter there. And there you go, yeah, 15.4K. So that is exactly what we want to see. I'm going to go ahead and get the PIM connector plugged back in, and then we'll try and see if we can start the car up and see if it'll work, quasi-normally with our sketchy resistor setup in there. And that should confirm that our issue was indeed just that broken wire in the connector. All right, we've got everything reconnected with our cobbled together resistor setup. Let's see what happens if we try to start the car. Look at that, it says it's in ready. So I think that did it. I thought maybe we'd have to clear the codes with our diagnostic program. Let's see if it goes into drive. And it does. Do we get spinning wheels? Well, it's spinning on the other side from the differential. I can hear it. There we go. Well, heck yeah. So that confirms it. That's our issue indeed. Now all that's left is to wait for our pigtail harness, which is going to take quite a while, actually. I couldn't find any supplier that had that connector in stock domestically here in the US, so I had to order it from overseas. So it'll probably take at least a week or two for it to come in, but once it does, we'll go ahead and get it installed on this car, splice it into that harness, and then this guy should be good to go. Probably took, I don't know, about a week and a half, something like that, but I finally got the pigtail harness that I was looking for here. So this is going to be our replacement for the one that had that broken pin. This one, you know, came as a pigtail with all the wires attached. Our harness in the car is only using these 4 wires. The 2 in the middle aren't used. So I'm probably going to try and see if we can depin these and then put the cavity plugs back in here so that it's, you know, basically the way it was before. If I can't remove the cavity plugs from the old one, I'll probably just cap these wires off. Definitely want them to be sealed because you don't want water to get into these. If water gets into the conductors, it can wick its way into the pins, and then it can cause corrosion, you know, for the rest of the pins in the connector. So we don't want exposed wires there. But anyways, let's go ahead and get the car up in the air. We'll double check, make sure this fits. So we'll plug it in, make sure it plugs in the way that it's supposed to, and then we'll go from there with splicing this thing on. So I've actually still got the resistor set up on there that we had used to test this, and the car actually drove with that on there, but I'm going to go ahead and pull all that stuff off since we don't need it anymore. And now we'll go ahead and unplug the existing connector here, just like so. And it looks like we're a match there. I'll plug this in, make sure it goes on there all the way. It does, and I hear it snap into place. So that should be a good fit. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is try to see if I can depin the 2 wires on that side of the connector. Either that or I'll try and see if I can cut them off flush. But before I do that, let me see if I can get these cavity plugs out of here. They're just basically just a silicone plug that's in the end of the connector there. Okay, I've basically just got a really small pick here. I'm just going to try and get in the edge of that and try to grab it. Except I'm actually pushing it in there further. Maybe I can try and push it out from the front side. There we go, I got that one. This one kind of got shoved in, so it's going to be a little bit difficult. Let me set this aside so I don't lose it. Yeah, I'm going to need something longer to stick in there because I shoved it in too far. There we go, I've got a straight pick, so now I should be able to just push that straight through there. There we go. Alright, so to depin this connector, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to remove our pin retainer here, which is just this plastic piece right here. So that just pops right out of there. Should be able to slide it all the way out, just like so. So I'll set this piece aside. And I'm just going to take a really long pick here, and there's these little holes right adjacent to the pins. This might be a little on the large side, but I'm going to shove it in that hole, and that should allow me to release this center wire right here. So I should be able to just give it a little tug, and that pulls right out. We'll do the same thing for the center one on the other side, which is this one right here. It's not releasing, so maybe we can stick that in a little more. Perhaps. There we go. Needed a little bit of a stronger tug, but I got it out of there. So now we're depinned there. We just have our 4 wires that we need. And then those cavity plugs that I removed from the old connector can just go right into our new one. And that just seals this off so that we can't get any moisture in there. They're just a little silicone plug that fits right in there. Now we're good to go go ahead and take our other connector off, and then we can start splicing this one on. Alright, so before I go removing this connector, I'm actually going to leave those 2 wires in there, and we'll just crimp these ones first. That way we don't get any positioning mixed up. I did mark these, and I specifically marked them in such a way where I had basically I had a silver Sharpie mark that I put on the even numbered pins. So our, don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera, but our brown one up there had a silver paint mark, and then this one that I just barely cut the pin off of also had a silver paint mark, which for these ones theoretically it shouldn't matter because it's a thermistor, so it measures the same resistance either way. But we do want to try and keep those correct. So the one that I just cut the pin off of is going to go into our pin 6 on our replacement connector. So I'm going to go ahead and start getting that ready. Although since we already have a stripped back wire on pin 5 in here, I'm going to go ahead and crimp on our butt connector. So that's already stripped back. I'm going to take the butt connector here. I'm going to stick it on that wire, and I'm going to crimp that down nice and tight. Give it a little pull test, make sure it's secure, and it is. I'm actually probably going to cut my wires on the pigtail here a little bit short off camera. That way we don't have nearly so much wire to deal with. I don't want them to be too extremely short because I do still need to be able to get the pins and stuff crimped, and I need space for heat shrink and all that good stuff. But I don't want them to be extremely long. Actually, I'll go ahead and crimp or strip both of these. So our wire colors are not going to match on our replacement pigtail, unfortunately, but that'll be okay. So we're going to go ahead and take that one we just crimped the pin on, and it's going to go on pin 5 here. So we'll go ahead and get our crimper there set up. And pin 5 is our black wire here. I already have the heat shrink staged on the wire. Give it a pull test. Good and secure. Now I'm going to go ahead and strip this wire back, and then we'll put a butt connector on there as well. Now, of course, the hard part here is that we don't have a lot of wire to work with. I suppose I could try and strip. Oh, I lost my piece of heat shrink there. I don't know if I can fit my auto wire stripper in here. I think I did on the other one, but that's a little bit difficult. So I'm going to get a different wire stripper real quick. All right, I'm going old school with this one. I don't know if this will actually fit in here any better though, so might be better off with the auto one, even if I have to futz around with it a little bit to get it to fit. There we go. I think I got a grip there. There we go. Not a super clean strip. Try and get just a touch more off of that. There we go. That's good. All right, I'll get the butt connector on here now. I'm sorry you guys probably can't see hardly anything that I'm doing here, but it's a tight space to work in. All right. Now we can bring our connector back down here. Get our piece of heat shrink on here. Don't want to forget that. And then we'll crimp that one onto the butt connector as well. Okay, I think we're good there. So now I can kind of tuck that up, hopefully out of our way a little bit. And then I think I'm going to try and de-pin those two wires so that we have as much to work with as possible. Well, yeah, I don't know. On second thought, I'm just going to snip them off flush right here because that'll be way easier. So that one was our pin 1, and this one with the silver mark on it is our pin 2. So normally if I would try to stagger the crimps so that you don't end up with a big bunch of crimps all together in one, but we don't have enough actual wire in here to work with, so unfortunately they are going to kind of be bundled together a little bit. But what I'm going to do here, I might actually put a new mark on that because I'm going to end up stripping that one off and I won't be able to see it anymore. So let me grab a Sharpie real quick. Technically these are just a loop, so again it's one of those ones where it shouldn't matter where they go, but I want to get it correct. So I marked that one actually with a black Sharpie. I don't know where my silver one went. The black is a little bit easier to see anyways. Now, can I actually get this thing in here? Yeah, that's just not going to work. And my new connector there keeps falling down in our way. Try and get that lined up and pull. There we go, that one's stripped. And I don't know if you can see this straining in there, but there's also a ground shield back here as well, which basically helps shield from signal interference. I don't know how you'd really have much of interference on just a resistive circuit, but I suppose anything's possible. These are pretty crappy crimpers, or strippers, or whatever you want to call them. I probably should have an end style stripper. That would make it easier. There we go. So we got both of those stripped back. I guess I need to cut our 2 new wires there to length and strip them. Use this little guy. It's a little bit easier to work with. Try and get those to the right length. It seems about right there. These ones I think I can get to with this stripper. That's way easier. Okay. Now I'm going to get my additional butt crimps and heat shrink. All right, all 4 of those are crimped. I'll give each of them one last pull test, make sure they're all secure, which they are. Okay, let me grab my heat gun real quick. All right, I've got my heat gun here. I'm going to get all the pieces of heat shrink into the positions where they need to be, which might be easier to do two-handed. And this is adhesive lined heat shrink, so when it heats up it actually has a glue in it that's going to seal all these crimps in there so that we don't get any moisture, which is the last thing we would want in here. So those are all heat shrinked and sealed in there. I can see the adhesive lining squeezing out through the heat shrink, so that's good. What I'm going to do real quick is I'm actually going to just plug this in momentarily. There we go. So I've got that plugged in now, and I want to start the car and make sure that everything works the way that it's supposed to before we tape this thing up. All right, car's back down on the ground here. Our contactor's closed, so that's a good sign. That means our interlock loop is still intact. Let's go ahead and start it. We're in ready. I don't see any alerts. let's go into a gear, and we are still off the ground here, so we should see spinning. Sweet. All right. We'll go back to park, and that's good to go. So let's go ahead and get the car back up in the air, and we'll tape up our harness there. Alrighty, so there we go. That's a wrap on this Fiat 500e. I guess there's a few key takeaways here. One, the issue is not always what you might initially go into it thinking it is. And sometimes freak problems like, broken wires and stuff can happen. And finding it is, you just got to have the patience to be able to go through things and find it. And I guess the second takeaway is don't necessarily always trust the dealer's diagnosis. A lot of the time, of course, every business, including myself, but car dealers and stuff, as well, especially, are in it to make a buck, and they want, quick turnaround jobs that they can make money on. And in this case, especially in the case of weird, not super well supported compliance cars like the 500e, a lot of the time the dealers just aren't super well versed in these cars and, don't necessarily know what to look for. Now, is that to say that the dealer intentionally, misdiagnosed this car in order to sell this customer, a motor? Probably not. But clearly they did not spend the time to do a thorough diagnosis and really delve into what the problem really was. To make it clear, I believe, if I recall correctly, the dealer quoted this customer somewhere in the neighborhood of like $8,000 to $10,000 to put a motor in this car, which is not worth that much. And obviously it would not have fixed the problem. Could have put a brand new motor in here, and that would not have addressed the issue of the broken wire. And, that's key. Doing proper diagnosis and finding the actual problem is the key to fixing things, right? You got to know where the problem is. So, anyways, rant over on that, but this was a pretty quick repair, nothing too complicated. The hardest part was actually finding the pigtail connector that actually fit on there. It took a little bit of digging around. I ended up doing like a reverse image search of the connector. It had some, numbering on it that I tried to look up, but that didn't really bring up anything super useful. And I ended up reverse image searching it, and that came up with a couple of results on AliExpress, actually, of all places. And it turns out that same style connector was used on some BMW diesel for, I don't know, a sensor or something. But it happened to be the same style connector, that 6-pin connector setup. So anyway, that was the hardest part, was just trying to find the right connector. If I wouldn't have been able to find it, the only options I would have had would have been to buy the entire, motor bay harness from Fiat, which I think I did look it up. It's like $800 for that harness. Or try and find another 500e in a wrecking yard and cut the old, cut the pigtail off of the harness and then, reuse that one, which would have worked okay. But finding these cars isn't necessarily super easy. I think there's a couple of them for sale around me that people are parting out that I probably could have gotten it. But having a new connector with longer wires on the ends of it made it a little bit easier to deal with. And it wasn't real expensive either. Anyways, so hopefully this was enjoyable, and it wasn't too difficult to see. It was just such a tight space to work in that filming made it a little difficult. So hopefully everything turned out okay. And anyways, thanks for watching.